Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy, and before I start, I would just like to apologize. I'm currently under the weather, so if I cough or my voice sounds a little raspy, that's why. But today I'm going to be telling you the story of Hansel and Gretel. Um, this specific version was written by Hobby in 2015. It was published in New York and it was published by Little Brown and Company. Now, before I begin, Hansel and Gretel is basically a story about justice, greed, cleverness, and that looks may be deceiving. So let's begin. So let's start with a family. There is a woodcutter who is the father. There is a stepmother who is not necessarily really nice to her children. And then there are the kids, Hansel and Gretel. So the woodcutter tries to make a living for his family, but is not able to sell a lot of wood, so the family is very poor. And because of that, they usually go hungry at night. Now, one day, the stepmother was fed up by not having enough food for herself, so she told her husband that basically she wanted to leave her kids or abandon them in the woods. Now, the father was like, I'm not going to abandon my kids. What are you talking about? But then the stepmother was basically telling him that, well, if you don't abandon them, then we're all going to die. So unfortunately, the father concedes to his wife's demands, but they don't really realize that, Hansel and Gretel heard what they were talking about. So what do you think their reaction was? Well, Gretel was really scared. She was saying, well, Hansel, what are we going to do? But Hansel said, don't worry, I'll come up with something. So Hansel thought to himself, well, if we're going to be abandoned in the woods, how would I be able to help Gretel and I find our way through the woods back to the cottage? Well, he thought, maybe I could use those pebbles I see outside, and as we walk through the forest, I can drop them so it's a little path. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So the next morning, the stepmother, the father, Hansel and Gretel all enter the woods, and they go deep into the woods. And the father was like, well, we're gonna be back after work. We'll pick you up. We'll find you. But hours go by and they're alone. Now, Hansel was a clever little child and he was like, well, we can just use my little pebble path to find our way home. So they do that. And the father so rejoiced that the children found their way home. He's like, yes, I'm so happy that you're home. But what do you think that the stepmother thought? Well, she was not very happy, and she told him, the father, that, well, we're going to have to do the same thing tomorrow. So the next morning, they again go out into the woods. They tell the children, oh, we'll be back after work. We'll pick you up. But again, they never show up. Now this time, Hansel didn't have pebbles, but he was like, well, I can leave breadcrumbs that were given to me as a pathway so that I could find my way home. Well, do any of you see a problem with that? What would breadcrumbs in a forest, would that be good or bad? Well, it was bad because the birds ate the bread, so they were lost in the forest. Now, Hansel and Gretel spent many hours trying to find their way out of the deep woods because it was dark, it was scary for them. But they see a little glimmer of hope. They actually see a cottage, but it's not any ordinary cottage. It is a cottage made out of cake, cookies, and candy. Oh my! And they're all excited. They're like, yes, finally food. So they begin eating the candy. Now, someone actually lives in the cottage. Who do you think might live in the cottage? Well, there's an old elderly woman who exits the cottage and she tells them, well, why are you eating my cottage? And they explain to her that they were lost in the woods. And this clever old woman is like, well, I'll help you. I'll give you food, I'll give you shelter. So she does that. She gives them warm, delicious porridge. She tucks them into really warm, comfortable uh, beds. But she's a little deceiving. Do you think, well, who is she? Well, she's actually an 150-year-old red-eyed witch. And she's not just any ordinary witch, but in fact, she wants to eat the children. Whoa, I mean, little intense, but Hansel and Gretel don't know this. So the next morning when they wake up, the witch reveals herself and she locks Hansel in a cage. Now she's like, well, before I eat you, I really want to fatten you up. So in her little cackly voice, she basically force feeds Hansel different candy, cookies, and cake from her cottage. Now Gretel is again really scared. She's like, Hansel, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this predicament? And then Hansel's like, well, Gretel, you're going to have to figure this out yourself because I'm locked in the cage. I can't do anything. I can't go anywhere. So, Gretel was thinking to herself, well, what could I do? Do you have any idea what Gretel could do in this time? Well, she quickly thought to herself, well, I can maybe try to trick the witch. So days go by, and eventually the witch is tired of waiting for the children to get fat. So she's like, you know what? I'm just going to eat you now. But she doesn't tell them this. No, she has her little devious plan. So she has a little furnace or an oven, and she tells Gretel, well, the bread's in there. Can you pop your head in there and see if it's done? Now, Gretel was not this naive. She knew that it wasn't bread she was going to be cooking, but her and Hansel eventually. So she thought to herself, this would be the perfect time to trick the witch. So she quickly, like a snap of a finger, said, well, I don't know how do we do that? Can you show me what you mean? And the witch was like, you stupid girl, how do you not know how to stick your head in? And she literally shows Gretel by sticking her head in. Now, Gretel takes all the courage that she can possibly have, and she pushes the witch into the oven and locks the door, and the witch dies. Now, Hansel and Gretel are so excited. They're like, yes, finally, we're free. So Gretel allows Hansel to be let out of the cage, but before they leave the cottage and try to find their way back home, they're thinking, I remember in the cottage I saw some jewels. Let's take the jewels back so we don't have to worry about our money problem. So they take the really nice red rubies, the necklaces, the diamonds, and they try to find their way home. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, how are they going to be able to find their way home? I mean, they've been lost in the woods for so long. Well, it takes them a few days, but eventually they recognize a path, and they eventually find the cottage. Now, they eventually run, and they're like, Father, Father, we're home. And the father's so happy that they're home, and he said that the stepmother actually died. She had eaten expired food, and the woodcutter had so many nightmares and insomnia because he couldn't live with himself because he felt so guilty that he left the kids. But the kids are like, well, we didn't come empty-handed. Look at all these jewels. Our money problem is over. So the father's like, well, that's great. You guys are alive. We have money now. We could be able to live a really happy life. So they lived the best happily ever after that they could. So that is the story of Hansel and Gretel. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and thanks!